So we are moving on to solving systems of equations by substitution. So we've been talking about how to solve by graphing them and looking for the point where they cross. And we've talked about how systems can have one solution, no solutions, or infinitely many. So those three options are still an option for the answers for solving by substitution. This is just a different way to solve. So there's three different ways. We've done graphing, now we're doing substitution. And substitution is where you take a number and you replace a variable with it. So just like if I had a substitute teacher, somebody comes in and replaces me. So we are going to take a value or an expression and replace a variable with it here to solve. So for number 1 here, it tells us that for the first equation, y equals -4/3 x plus 6. And then the second one says y equals 2. So this one is already half solved for us. Our y value is 2. So we can put that in the ordered pair. Now, since y is 2, I am going to substitute that in for the y variable. So I'm going to have 2 equals -4/3 x plus 6. And now I have an equation that I can solve for x. I don't have two variables anymore. I just have the x. So we're going to subtract 6 from both sides. 2 minus 6 would be -4. And then we still have the -4/3 x left. And then we have to divide by -4/3. So x is left on this side. And remember, when we divide with fractions, we do keep, change, flip. So we're keeping the -4, the first number, except for we're making it a fraction. We're changing the division to multiply, and we're going to flip the -4/3. So it's going to be -3/4. Now, I like to reduce before I multiply, so I notice that we have 4s on an angle from each other, so we can divide both of them by 4, and they would become 1. And then we'd have -1 times -3 at the top, so that would be a +3. And we have 1 times 1 at the bottom, which is 1, and 3 over 1 is the same thing as 3. So x equals 3, so we fill that in our ordered pair. Remember, x is always the first number. And we have the point where the two graphs or the two equations cross or meet. Now, number 2 is similar, but instead of being y equals just a plain number, y is 8x. So we're going to take that and we're going to replace the y with it. So I'm going to rewrite -5x minus 5. But y is now 8x. So I replaced the y with the 8x. So I substituted that in. Now I have to multiply those two. So this is going to be -5x. -5 times 8 is going to be -40x. Then I can combine like terms. -5 minus 40 would be -45x. And then I can divide by -45. So I have x equals 0 divided by -45 would be 0. So for my ordered pair, x is 0. And now I can take that and plug it back into one of the original equations. And I would pick the bottom equation, and it doesn't matter which one. One usually is more work than the other. So that's why I'm going to pick the bottom equation. So I'm going to do y equals 8, and we just solved x. For x, we figured out it was 0, so this is going to be a 0. So y equals 8 times 0, and that would equal 0. So this system, the two equations cross at the origin, the point 0, 0. All right. Let's do this one here. Y equals 3/5 x, and y equals -2/5 x plus 5. So y equals 3/5 x. I'm going to replace the other y with that. So I'm going to have 3/5 x equals negative 2/5 x plus 5. Now I have x's on both sides of my equation here, and I want to move the smaller one, so I alleviate working with more negatives. So I'm going to add 2/5 x to both sides. And 3/5 plus 2/5 would be 5/5, and 5/5 is 1. So 1x equals, and we have just 5 left on that side. So for our ordered pair, x equals 5. Now we take that and we have to plug it back into one of the original equations. And again, you get to pick which equation, whether it be the top one or the bottom one. I'm going to pick the top one because it has less things. It's simpler than the bottom one. So we have y equals 3/5 times x, and x is 5. 5 as a fraction is 5/1. And I have to multiply those. So I'm going to reduce. I have 5's on an angle, so divide both of those by 5. They would be 1's. So 3 times 1 at the top is 3, and 1 times 1 at the bottom is 1, and 3/1 is the same thing as 3. So my y value is 3. So these two lines cross at the point 5, 3. Now for my last one here, you will notice that I don't have one that's solved for x or y. So in order to do the substitution method, I have to have at least one of the equations be solved for one of the variables. So looking at the top equation, if I wanted to solve for x, I would have to move the y, and then I have to get rid of that 4 in front. So that's 2 steps. If I wanted to solve for the y in the top equation, I would have to get rid of the x and then divide by 6 to get rid of that. So that's another 2 steps. But if I go to the bottom equation, the only thing that I'm going to have to do is divide by 6. So that's only 1 step. So that's what I'm going to pick. So divide both sides by 6. I have y equals 18 divided by 6 would be 3. So now I have an equation solved for a variable, and it's a number, it's a constant, so that's our y value. So we've already solved for y there. Now I have to take that y and that 3 and plug it in for y in the other equation. So I'm going to have 4x plus 6 times 3 equals negative 6. And I'm going to simplify. So 4x plus 18 equals negative 6. And now I can solve. So I'm going to minus 18. And I have 4x equals negative 6 minus 18 would be negative 24. And then I have to divide by 4. And x equals negative 6. So then I can write that in my ordered pair. And these two lines cross at negative 6, 3. One other thing I really want to point out to you is notice we solved for y first. Make sure that when you write that in your ordered pair, even though we got that answer first, it's our second number in our ordered pair, because remember, ordered pairs are in the form of x, comma, y. So you have to write them in that order, not the order that you've solved for them in.